Hey everyone and welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something I bet you're already living and breathing every day, remote work. But we're going to zoom in specifically on how this whole new world impacts those of you in HR and training roles. We've got a practical handbook for HR pros and a research overview on how tech is shaking up the HR landscape. So get ready, it's about to get insightful.
Yeah. You know what's really been grabbing my attention is how hybrid work models are becoming the new normal. Like, it's not just a fad. Even the European Commission is funding a project. It's called HIRER. Stands for Human Resources for Innovative and Responsible Enterprises. And it's all about equipping HR professionals with the skills they need to manage this big shift.
That really drives home the point that adaptability is absolutely key these days, right? The handbook mentions that folks in this higher project need basic digital skills and a willingness to learn how to manage these new kinds of teams. It's a good reminder that we all need to keep learning and growing if we want to stay relevant.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really important concept, e-leadership. It's not just about knowing tech, it's about actually using those digital tools and strategies to lead teams effectively no matter where they are. Think about it this way. A traditional manager might be great at in-person meetings and building relationships face-to-face, but an e-leader needs to master virtual communication, data-driven decision-making, and keeping up with the ever-changing digital world.
So you're saying command and control is out
Yeah.
and collaborate and connect is in, even if it's through a screen.
Exactly. And the handbook really emphasizes that reliance on information and communication technologies, or ICT, is only increasing. Think about all the ways organizations use tech now. Automating tasks, developing new digital products and services, it goes on and on. What sets e-leaders apart is they need to be fluent in both the language of business and the language of ICT.
Now, that is fascinating. It's like they need to be bilingual, but instead of languages, it's business and tech. The handbook even says that e-leaders are different from traditional managers or even entrepreneurs because of this dual expertise. It's a powerful combo for sure, especially for our listeners who are looking to move up in their HR careers. So what are the magic ingredients that make someone a truly effective e-leader?
Well, the handbook lists 8 key skills: strategic vision, technological literacy, change management, data-driven decision-making, digital communication, talent development, cybersecurity awareness, and collaboration. Let's unpack each of these a bit so you can see how they actually play out in the real world.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's start with strategic vision. What does that actually look like in the context of e-leadership?
It's about being able to see the big picture, anticipate what's coming next, and set a clear direction for the team. Even in a virtual environment, it's not just about dealing with today's problems, it's also about envisioning what tomorrow's workplace will be like and preparing your team for it.
So it's like being a captain navigating a ship through uncharted waters, but you're using a digital compass and a map that's constantly being updated. Okay, what about technological literacy? That one seems pretty straightforward.
It's a bit more than just knowing how to use email and Zoom. It's about understanding what different technologies can and can't do, being able to choose the right tools for the job, and constantly learning and adapting as new technologies pop up.
Got it. So e-leaders need to be tech-savvy, but also tech-wise, knowing when to use a specific tool and when it might not be the best fit. Okay, what about change management? Seems like change is the only constant these days.
Especially in this world of remote and hybrid work, right? Effective e-leaders need to be able to guide their teams through all these constant changes, whether it's adopting new technologies, adapting to new ways of working, or navigating those unexpected disruptions that pop up.
It's about being that calming presence in the middle of the storm of change, making sure everyone on the team feels supported and ready to handle whatever comes next. Now, data-driven decision-making. That sounds interesting. How does that actually work in e-leadership?
Well, think about it. In a traditional office, you might get a feel for how your team is doing just through casual conversations and observing people. But in a remote setting, you really need to rely on data to understand what's working, what's not, and where to focus your energy.
So it's about using data to gain real insights into team performance, employee engagement, and even things like well-being.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, what about digital communication? I feel like I'm already drowning in emails and Slack messages.
Yeah, I hear you. The key here is effective digital communication, which is more than just sending a ton of messages. It's about being clear, concise, and thoughtful in your communication. It's about choosing the right channels for different types of messages, and understanding how things like tone and timing can be different in virtual communication.
Right, because an email can be so easily misinterpreted without those in-person cues. It's about being a master of the written word in the digital space, making sure your message is received the way you intended it. Now, talent development.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is even more crucial in a remote setting where it's harder to provide those informal learning opportunities that naturally happen in an
Oh,
office.
exactly. E-leaders need to be proactive about figuring out what their team members need to learn and giving them opportunities for growth, even if it's all happening virtually. This might involve online courses, virtual mentoring, or even just encouraging team members to share what they know with each other.
So it's about fostering a culture of continuous learning, even when everyone is miles apart. Okay, what about cybersecurity awareness? That one feels really relevant with all the data breaches and cyber attacks happening these days.
Absolutely. E-leaders need to be on top of cybersecurity, making sure that their team members understand the risks and are following best practices to protect sensitive data. This includes things like strong passwords, being wary of phishing scams, and understanding why data encryption is so important.
So it's not just about protecting the organization, but also making sure your team members are cyber smart. Makes sense. And finally, collaboration. That seems like it's at the heart of effective e-leadership.
It really is. E-leaders need to build a collaborative environment where team members feel like they can share ideas, work together smoothly, and support each other, even when they're not physically in the same room. This takes strong communication skills, a focus on building trust, and knowing how to use digital tools to make collaboration easier.
So it's about creating a virtual space where teamwork can thrive,
Mm.
where everyone feels connected and like they can contribute their best.
And that's what e-leadership is all about, leading and inspiring teams to achieve great things no matter where they're located.
Now, let's get into one of the biggest challenges HR folks are facing in this new world of work: onboarding and training new employees remotely. How do you make someone feel welcome and part of the team when you've never even met them face to face?
That's a really important question, and one that the handbook tackles head on. It really stresses how important it is to create a personalized and engaging onboarding experience, even if it's all happening virtually.
I'm all ears. What kind of strategies do they suggest?
Well, they suggest using a variety of digital tools to make the whole onboarding process more interactive and engaging. Things like welcome videos, online handbooks, even interactive quizzes.
I like that. It's all about making that whole onboarding experience more human and less like just a bunch of paperwork.
hmm
Now, what about training? How can HR people actually deliver training to remote employees in a way that's engaging and actually makes a difference?
The handbook really highlights the use of micro e-learning platforms, which deliver information in those short, focused bursts that are easy to digest and fit into a busy schedule. They also suggest using a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning methods to make sure you're catering to different learning styles and preferences.
I like that. Using a mix of approaches keeps things fresh and interesting. Can you give me an example of what this might actually look like?
Sure. Let's say you're training a remote sales team on a new product. You could start with a live virtual training session using something like Zoom to introduce the product, answer any questions, and get everyone excited about it. Then you could follow up with a series of short, engaging e-learning modules that employees can go through on their own time to make sure they really understand the key concepts and test their knowledge.
I love that. It's like creating a multifaceted learning experience using different tools and approaches to keep everyone engaged and motivated.
Exactly. And the key is to make sure the training is relevant, practical, and easily accessible, no matter where your employees are located.
All right, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about something I find really exciting: the whole rise of data-intensive tools in HR. It seems like we're finally moving away from gut-based decisions and embracing what data can tell us.
We are. And it's changing how HR works in a big way. Data-intensive tools allow HR professionals to gather insights into every aspect of the employee lifecycle, from recruitment and talent management to employee engagement and performance.
It's like having a crystal ball that helps you make better, smarter decisions. Can you give me some specific examples of these tools?
Sure, we've got those AI-powered applicant tracking systems. They can analyze resumes and predict if a candidate will be successful, which helps HR make better hiring decisions. Then there are people analytics platforms. These can help with things like workforce planning, identifying trends, and predicting whether employees might leave the company. And don't forget about employee engagement platforms. They can measure and improve employee satisfaction by gathering feedback and figuring out what needs to be improved.
It's mind-blowing how AI and data are changing the whole HR game. It's like having a super efficient assistant that can analyze tons of data and provide those really valuable insights. That way, HR professionals can focus on more strategic work.
Exactly. And these tools can automate those repetitive tasks, make the data more accurate, and free up HR professionals to focus on the human side of things. Things like building relationships, creating a positive culture, and making work more engaging and supportive.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something that's often forgotten in this age of technology moving so fast, the importance of continuous learning and development for HR professionals. With all these new technologies and ways of working, it's more important than ever to stay ahead of the curve.
You're so right. The research we've been looking at really emphasizes how important it is for HR professionals to keep learning and adapting. The skills that were essential a few years ago might not be what you need today or in the future.
So what are some of the key areas that HR professionals should focus on developing?
Well, digital literacy is essential. HR professionals need to be comfortable using all sorts of digital tools and technologies. It's not just knowing how to use specific software, it's understanding how technology is changing the workplace and how to use it effectively.
It's like becoming fluent in the language of tech.
Exactly. And data analysis skills are becoming more important too. HR professionals need to be able to gather, interpret, and use data to make good decisions. This means understanding basic statistics, working with spreadsheets and data visualization tools, and being able to spot those trends and patterns.
It sounds like there's a lot to learn.
There is. But there are a lot of resources out there to help. Online courses, webinars, professional development programs, and even just reading industry publications can be really valuable.
And we can't forget the importance of those e-leadership skills we discussed.
Absolutely. Leading and managing effectively in a digital world takes a unique skill set. Things like virtual communication, managing remote teams, fostering collaboration, and building trust when everyone's working virtually.
It sounds like the future of HR is all about embracing technology, data, and continuous learning, becoming a blend of tech-savvy leader, data analyst, and human connector.
That's a great way to put it. And those HR professionals who are ready to adapt and grow are going to be the ones who really thrive in this new world of work.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with something to think about. What are some creative ways that you can use technology and data in your HR practices? How can you use them to enhance employee well-being and create a work environment that's more engaging and supportive? It's a big question, but it's one worth exploring. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll keep exploring e-leadership and remote work.
Welcome back to the deep dive. As we continue exploring e-leadership and remote work, there's one element that keeps coming up in the research: employee well-being. It's so easy to get caught up in the technology side of things and forget about the human element.
Absolutely. We can't just throw tech at the problem and expect it to magically fix everything. So what are some of the biggest challenges to employee well-being in a remote or hybrid work setup?
Well, the research highlights a few key areas. One is isolation and loneliness. When you're not physically with your colleagues every day, it can be harder to build those social connections and feel like you're part of a team.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those water cooler chats and quick coffee breaks can really add to that sense of camaraderie and belonging.
Exactly. And then you've got those communication barriers that can pop up in a virtual environment. Misunderstandings are just easier when you're relying solely on emails, messages, or even video calls.
Right. Because you miss out on all those nonverbal cues and that in-person energy that can help clarify a message.
Another challenge is the difficulty of maintaining work-life boundaries. When your office is your home, it can be tough to switch off and disconnect from work. This can lead to longer hours, more stress, and even burnout.
It's like the lines between work life and personal life get all blurry. And it's easy to feel like you're always on.
And then there's the fact that we're all relying more and more on technology, which is essential for remote work, but it can also lead to tech fatigue and burnout. Staring at screens all day, attending back-to-back virtual meetings, constantly getting notifications, it can wear you down.
It sounds like remote work can be a bit of a double-edged sword. It offers flexibility and autonomy, but it also has these unique challenges to well-being. So what can HR managers actually do to support their employees in these areas? How do you create a virtual work environment that's productive? A&D promotes well-being.
The handbook has some really practical strategies. One that's simple but effective is encouraging regular virtual check-ins. This could be a quick team meeting at the beginning of the week, or even just a casual one-on-one between a manager and their team member.
It's like those informal moments you'd have in an office, just adapted for a virtual world.
Exactly. It's about creating opportunities for connection and making sure employees feel seen and heard, even when they're not physically there.
That makes a lot of sense. What about those communication challenges? Any tips for bridging the gap and minimizing those misunderstandings?
Open communication is key. HR can really promote a culture of clear and concise communication. Encourage people to use video calls whenever possible so you can see those nonverbal cues. Be mindful of different time zones when scheduling meetings, and make sure everyone has access to the same information and resources.
So it's about setting clear expectations and providing the tools and training to make virtual communication work really well.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that not everyone thrives in a remote work environment. Some people really miss that face-to-face interaction and the structure of a traditional office.
So flexibility is key, recognizing that one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly. HR needs to be aware of individual needs and preferences and be willing to adapt work arrangements to fit those needs. Maybe some employees need a hybrid model where they come into the office a few days a week, while others do their best work fully remote. The key is finding what works best for each person and for the team as a whole.
It sounds like creating a supportive remote work culture is all about finding the right balance. What are some other things HR managers can do to promote well-being, especially when it comes to things like work-life balance and tech fatigue?
Well, the research really emphasizes how important it is to promote work-life balance. This could involve encouraging employees to set specific work hours and stick to them as much as possible.
It's about setting those mental boundaries, even when your physical workspace is your living room.
Right. It's also important to encourage employees to take breaks during the day, get away from their screens, and do things that help them recharge and disconnect from work.
It's a good reminder that taking care of yourself is crucial, especially when you're working remotely.
Absolutely. HR can also help by providing access to mental health resources, whether it's an employee assistance program, online counseling services, or even just information and resources on stress management and mindfulness techniques.
Those are all great points, and it all comes back to creating that culture of trust and support, where employees feel comfortable talking about these issues and asking for help when they need it.
Exactly. And it's important to lead by example. When managers prioritize their own well-being, it shows their team members that it's okay to do the same.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's often overlooked, but incredibly important: the legal and ethical stuff that comes with remote work. With employees working from all over the place, are there specific regulations that HR managers need to be aware of?
Absolutely. The laws around remote work are constantly changing, so it's crucial for HR managers to stay up to date on the latest rules and regulations in their area, as well as any federal regulations that apply.
Sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It can be. Some key things to consider are data privacy, cybersecurity, wage and hour laws, and workplace safety.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with data privacy. It seems like that's a big concern these days, with so much sensitive information being shared online. How can HR managers make sure they're protecting employee data when everyone's working remotely?
It all starts with having strong cybersecurity in place. This means using secure communication channels like encrypted email and messaging platforms. It also means encrypting any sensitive data that's stored electronically, and making sure that employees are using strong passwords and being careful about phishing scams.
So it's about creating a secure digital environment and teaching employees about the best ways to stay safe online.
Exactly. And remember, data privacy regulations can be different depending on where your employees are located, so you really need to understand the laws that apply to your specific workforce.
What about those wage and hour laws? Do they apply differently to remote workers?
That's a great question. HR managers need to be sure they understand the federal and state laws about things like overtime pay, meal breaks, and rest periods. They also need to make sure that their remote workers are accurately tracking their hours and being paid correctly.
Sounds like there's potential for problems if HR isn't careful.
There is. But with careful planning and a good understanding of the rules, it's definitely manageable.
Now, workplace safety might seem less important when people are working remotely, since they're not physically in an office. But I imagine there are still safety things to consider for remote workers.
You're right. It's not just about making sure the fire extinguishers are up to date. Employers still have to provide a safe working environment, even for remote employees. This might involve things like giving guidelines for setting up ergonomic workstations at home to prevent injuries.
So things like having a comfortable chair, good lighting, and a setup that doesn't cause strain or discomfort.
Exactly. HR managers might also think about doing virtual safety checks to spot any potential hazards in the home office environment.
That's a really good idea. It shows that the organization cares about the well-being of their remote employees and is taking steps to keep them safe.
And don't forget about communication. HR should be proactive about letting remote employees know what's expected of them in terms of safety, provide resources and support, and encourage employees to report any concerns or potential hazards.
Okay, let's move on to another key area that HR is dealing with in the age of remote work: onboarding and training new employees. It can be harder to build those initial connections and create a sense of belonging when you're not physically together.
Absolutely. The handbook really stresses how important it is to make remote onboarding personalized and engaging. It's about going beyond just sending a bunch of forms and paperwork.
I'm curious, what are some companies actually doing to make remote onboarding more welcoming and effective?
The handbook highlights some really innovative approaches. One company that stands out is Zoom. They're using their own video conferencing platform to do things like virtual meet and greets, interactive training sessions, and even remote team building activities.
That's clever. They're not only showing off their own product, but also creating a really immersive and engaging experience for new hires. What other best practices does the handbook recommend?
Clear communication is essential. It might sound simple, but it's so important to set clear expectations from the start. Provide a well-structured onboarding program, and make sure new hires know exactly who to contact if they have questions or concerns.
It's about creating that sense of structure and support, even in a virtual environment.
Exactly. The handbook also suggests using different digital tools to make onboarding more interactive and engaging. Things like welcome videos from the CEO or other team members, online handbooks that are easy to use, and even interactive quizzes to test knowledge and make learning more fun.
I love the idea of using interactive elements like that. It keeps things interesting and helps new hires remember information better. Now, what about training? How are companies delivering training to remote employees in a way that's engaging and actually makes a difference?
Micro e-learning platforms are becoming really popular. Remember, we talked about those earlier. They offer those short, bite-sized learning modules that are easy to squeeze into a busy schedule.
Yes, it's a great way to reinforce those important concepts and make learning easier to digest.
Another best practice is to use a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning. So you might have a live virtual training session for some real-time interaction and Q&A, and then follow that up with self-paced e-learning modules that employees can access whenever it's convenient.
It's all about being flexible and catering to different learning styles. Some people learn best in a live, interactive environment, while others prefer to go at their own pace.
Exactly. The key is to create a dynamic and flexible training program that meets the needs of your remote workforce.
Let's talk data for a minute. We touched on this earlier, but I want to dive a bit deeper into how HR is using data-intensive tools. It seems like these tools are really changing how HR works, allowing for more data-driven decisions and insights. Can you give us a little more detail on how these tools are actually transforming HR practices?
We're seeing a big shift from decisions based on gut feelings to decisions based on data in HR. These tools let HR professionals gather and analyze data on pretty much every aspect of the employee experience, from recruiting and talent management to employee engagement and
It's
performance.
like having a superpowered microscope that lets you see patterns and trends you might have missed before.
Exactly. And armed with these insights, HR can make smarter decisions, identify areas that need improvement, and create a better, more engaging work environment for everyone.
Okay, let's get specific. What are some examples of data-intensive tools that HR uses a lot?
Well, we already talked about those AI-powered applicant tracking systems. They can analyze resumes, pick out the best candidates, and even predict how successful a candidate might be. This can save HR teams tons of time and effort when they're hiring.
That's amazing. It's like having a super smart assistant that can go through hundreds of resumes and find the perfect matches.
Then there are those people analytics platforms, which
Mhm.
are great for things like workforce planning, spotting trends in employee data, and even predicting things like employee turnover.
So you can get ahead of potential problems and fix them before they even happen.
Exactly. These platforms can also be used to see how effective HR programs and initiatives are, so you can see what's working and what's not and make changes as needed.
That's so helpful. It takes the guesswork out of HR and lets you make more strategic decisions.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about employee engagement platforms. They can be used to get feedback from employees, measure how satisfied they are, and find ways to improve things. Some platforms even use AI to analyze employee sentiment and give recommendations for boosting morale and engagement.
It's amazing how technology is being used to make workplaces more human-centered,
Yeah,
even in a remote setting.
it really is. And these tools are just the beginning. As technology keeps evolving, we can expect to see even more innovative tools and applications that will change the way HR operates.
Now, before we get to the last part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier: the importance of continuous learning and development in HR. With technology changing so fast and the world of work constantly evolving, It's more important than ever for HR professionals to stay ahead of the curve.
You're absolutely right. The research we've been looking at really emphasizes how important it is for HR professionals to be lifelong learners, constantly upskilling and adapting to new technologies and trends.
So what are some of the key skills that HR professionals should be working on?
Well, digital literacy is a must-have. HR professionals need to be comfortable using a wide range of digital tools and technologies. It's not just about knowing how to use certain software programs, it's also about understanding how technology is changing the workplace and how to use it effectively.
It's like becoming fluent in the language of technology.
Exactly. Data analysis skills are also becoming more and more important. HR professionals need to be able to gather, interpret, and use data to make good decisions. This involves understanding basic statistics, working with spreadsheets and data visualization tools, and having a knack for seeing trends and patterns.
Sounds like there's a lot to learn.
There is, but there are tons of resources available to help. Online courses, webinars, professional development programs, and even just reading industry publications can be really helpful.
And of course, we can't forget about those e-leadership skills we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Leading and managing effectively in a digital environment requires a whole different set of skills. Things like virtual communication, remote team management, fostering collaboration, and building trust in a virtual setting.
It sounds like the future of HR is all about embracing technology, data, and continuous learning.
It is. And those HR professionals who are willing to adapt and evolve are the ones who will really thrive in this new world of work.
Well said. Okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. What steps can you take today to improve your own digital literacy, data analysis skills, and e-leadership abilities? It's a question worth considering as we navigate this constantly changing world of work. We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive, where we'll finish up our exploration of e-leadership and remote work. Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into e-leadership and remote work. We've covered so much, from figuring out what makes a really effective e-leader to tackling the challenges of managing teams, onboarding, and training in this digital world.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. We've really explored how HR can use technology and data to create a remote work environment that works for everyone, the organization, i.e. the employees.
You know, one thing that's really struck me as we've been talking is how important it is to find the right balance in almost everything when it comes to remote work.
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. It's about hitting that sweet spot between flexibility and structure, autonomy and accountability, harnessing the power of tech without forgetting about the human side of things.
It's like walking a tightrope. You have to find that perfect balance to create a workplace that's both productive and supportive. And it's not just about finding that balance for the entire organization. It's about finding it for each individual employee, too.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another. Some people love structure and clear guidelines, while others need more freedom and flexibility to do their best work.
That's where those personalized approaches come in, right? Tailoring strategies to fit each person's needs. It's realizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for managing remote teams.
Exactly. And technology can really help with personalization. Remember those AI-powered learning platforms we talked about? They can create individual learning paths for each employee based on their skills, goals, and how they learn best. So everyone gets a truly personalized learning experience.
It's like having a personal tutor for every employee, guiding them on their own learning journey. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, our listener. What are some key takeaways you can use in your own work and career? What are those nuggets of wisdom you can put into practice right away?
First things first, embrace the shift to remote and hybrid work. This is not a fad, it's the future. It's full of challenges, A&D opportunities. And the people who are willing to adapt and embrace this new way of working are going to be the ones who succeed.
It's not about resisting change, it's about riding the wave and finding those chances to grow and innovate.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment with new technologies and approaches. The way we work is changing all the time, so what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. Be open to trying out new tools, platforms, and ways of doing things.
It's about being a lifelong learner, always looking for new knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
But as we embrace all this amazing technology, we have to remember that technology is just a tool. It can't replace human connection.
That's so important. Use technology to improve communication, collaboration, and well-being, not to replace them altogether. Schedule those virtual coffee breaks, encourage team-building activities, and create a culture where people feel comfortable talking openly and supporting each other, even if it's all happening online.
It's about being creative and finding ways to maintain those human connections and build strong relationships, even when you're not physically in the same place. And as the world of work keeps changing, invest in your own development, especially in areas like digital literacy, data analysis, and those essential e-leadership skills.
Those are the skills that will make you stand out and make you a valuable asset to any organization, no matter what your role or industry is.
And finally, remember that building a truly great remote work culture takes a focus on balance, personalization, and a genuine commitment to employee well-being.
It's about creating a work environment where employees feel supported, valued, and empowered to do their best, no matter where they happen to be working.
Those are fantastic takeaways.
Yeah.
I really hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and inspiration as you navigate this exciting new world of work.
And remember, learning and discovering new things never stops. So keep diving deeper, keep exploring, and keep striving to create a work environment where everyone can thrive.
That's a perfect way to end this episode. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving.